This is Kayfabe Hade Radio. Let's talk about CM Punk. More specifically, let's talk about his appearance on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani. He sits down with Ariel, looks around, notices a Bret Hart stuffy, grabs it, hugs it, says, "I love this guy." And then he puts it back. Not even 2 minutes in, he says he's home and back where he belongs, which is the same thing he said when he went to AEW, but that's for another story. They talk about his WWE return and how Triple H FaceTimed him on Thanksgiving. He tells us it was Bayley's idea for him to visit Raw back in May 2023, which was the infamous Punk's backstage, but he still works at AEW situation. He says someone in AEW were betrayed to describe this backstage visit. He says today's WWE feels much different than when he left. It's more relaxed. He jokes that he hasn't seen Vince since his third day back, and then says the business is better off without Vince. I think basically everybody believes that, because it's the truth. The man is a sick, depraved individual. It gets a little uncomfortable as they discuss the Vince allegations, because CM Punk compares it to the Chris Benoit situation, which was kind of weird and off-putting, and it's sort of put a damper on the fun that him and Ariel were having at this point in the conversation. They then talk about the triceps injury at the Royal Rumble and what it did to future plans. Punk tells Ariel the original plan was indeed for him to wrestle Seth Rollins at WrestleMania for the World Heavyweight Championship. They talk about how guys have more freedom on the microphone these days, and how there might be a double standard for guys like him and The Rock to just say whatever they want and swear on live TV. Punk responds with he doesn't really care about the swearing on the show. He just hates all the insider wrestling terms that are being used so freely, which is understandable. As a guy that, as a diehard in the business, Punk probably would like people and run around saying stuff like Swerve and Big Pop and all those other ones. He says AEW is a business that doesn't do business, and that wasn't what he was sold on when he agreed to join the roster. He describes the Jack Perry incident and says he wanted to bust up a rental car, and 4 people before CM Punk said no, including Tony Schiavone. Apparently Jack Perry yelled at everybody that told him no. Punk asked Perry, "Why do you want to do dumb internet shit?" And Perry told him, "Why don't you do something about it?" He says he then told Tony Khan to handle it, and Tony asked him, "What do I do?" And then Tony did nothing. So, as Punk described it, I didn't punch anybody. I sort of just choked him a little bit. And then he told Tony he quit, and he called Tony a clown. They talk about the fallout from Brawlout. He says he felt slandered when Tony said that he feared for his life in that moment. He said, "If you believe that, then okay, but leave me alone." He says working with Hangman and those guys is nothing but high school drama. Everybody over there has their own little cliques. He does, however, admit the positives did outweigh the negatives during his time in AEW. He said working with guys like Sting, he never thought he'd be able to do, and it was incredible. And he says AEW isn't a business. It's not about selling tickets or making money. It's just about a bunch of guys having fun. He then sort of says that MJF would be better off leaving AEW. You know, he sort of mentions how some guys can make a name in that system, but they shouldn't stay in that system type situation. He then throws shade at both AEW and Dave Meltzer by stating these guys don't really care about business. They just want to have a 5-star match in a building that's only a quarter full, referencing the recent lack of ticket sales for AEW. He says he almost came back to WWE when he appeared on Backstage on Fox. He figured that was kind of their way of leaning him back in, but he wasn't 100% sure of that, which means he almost was never in AEW. had he rejoined WWE at that time, I doubt he would have ever been in AEW. Meaning that the interview with Ariel Helwani probably isn't even happening. Kind of crazy to think about. Punk mentions he has a lot of friends in AEW. He hopes that everything that he said on this during this interview doesn't get them into any trouble. And nobody holds grudges. He mentions guys like Samoa Joe, the House of Black, FTR, Danhausen, Darby Allin, and Sting. He then talks about how he never has bad blood with anybody. He says he respects everyone at first, but when he loses that respect, he hates you and he will hold a grudge. He said he'll never speak to Colt Cabana again because Colt Cabana basically caused all this. They then talk about the different CM Punk's appearance, how he's got the hair slicked back and gray in the beard. Punk says all the gray in the beard and all his scars are who he is. He's not changing. He mentions how Vince McMahon probably wouldn't let him on TV if he had that much gray in his beard. He says so. My aging shows you that the business is changing and changing for the better. He says they talk more about the injuries, and Ariel mentions how he tore the other tricep while working for AEW. Punk mentions how the difference between the two injuries was how people treated him while he was injured. He said nobody ever called him to check in when he was injured in AEW. And he says now, back in WWE, he's got the best doctors. People are calling him constantly to check in. And he ends the interview with saying he didn't think he'd ever find this happiness again. And he says he used to be the guy that created waves. Now he's just the guy that rides. Overall, it was a good interview. It was a long interview. The video is available on YouTube. I think it's nearly 2 hours. I think it's an hour and 51 minutes or so. It goes more in depth than I just did, obviously. This is just a little recap video of what I thought were the important parts to mention. Wild interview, and it's crazy how AEW responded on Dynamite days later with having Adam Copeland come out, and now apparently AEW is going to put out release the video footage of what happened. The Young Bucks are going to do that this Wednesday on Dynamite. So that'll be interesting. But overall, this was a fun interview. It was a good watch. If you want to hear Punk for 2 hours or hear some sort of insider stuff, and I know a lot of people do, this is a great listen. It's a phenomenal interview. Yeah, those are my thoughts on CM Punk on the MMA Hour. This is Kayfabe Hate Radio.